I'd like to welcome everyone to our June Jyotish Journey webinar. This webinar will be associated with the most recent article, The Guru's Clue, but we'll also touch on things related to the article before that, the kaleidoscope of time as well, and Jyotish in general. I see Rohit is with us now.
Hi, Mark.
Rohit. Good to see you. It's been a while.
Same as you.
Okay. So as usual, we'll begin with our Sanskrit prayers before we jump into this. Aham gananam tva ganapatigun havamahe, priyanam tva priyapatigun havamahe, niddinam tva nidipatigun havamahe, vasso mama aham jani, gavadam namajasi gavadam, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Gurureva Brahma, Tasmahe Shrihi Guruvehe Namaha, Tasmahe Shrihi Guruvehe Namaha. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Munatu, Sahaviram Kavavahe, Tejasvina, Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So for those who may have just joined us, welcome. And we have as our moderator today, Ekaterina from Bulgaria. So I want to begin just by thanking her for her willingness to play this role. Arun may be joining us, but he's in India at the moment, so he was uncertain whether he was going to be able to. So to start off on, I'm going to show you a chart that most of you would have seen before. The chart of Barbra Streisand, probably one of the greatest entertainers in the recent modern era, multimedia entertainer. And I believe I used her chart probably in the article Kaleidoscope of Time, subtitled on the importance of Dasha Lagna. But I was doing the discussion then all from the standpoint of, I believe, the Parashari system, right? And so, when we apply Chara Dasha to her chart, of course, Chara Dasha always starts from the Lagna. In which direction would Chara Dasha progress in this chart? Anyone? Anybody remember the calculation of Chara Dasha? Which direction would it go in? If the first major period was Pisces, what would it be after that? No one can tell me that. Ekaterina, feel free to jump in here if you want. So we would progress in the direct order, folks. So she'd run her period of Pisces, period of Aries, now come to the period of Taurus, and she's in her late teens, okay? And what strikes you, and takes her up to her early 20s, what strikes you about that period? Again, now we're doing our analysis from the Jaimini point of view.
The 110 exchange.
Right. So now everybody should understand why I'm showing you this chart. One of the distinctive features of the chart of Barbra Streisand is, of course, the exchange between Venus and Saturn. And when she's running her Taurus major period, then this exchange becomes a very favorable 110 exchange. And it was actually during this major period that she started her career rise. She actually began in her late teens as singing in nightclubs. And started to get quite a reputation that way, drawing big crowds. But also during this period, she made her first Broadway stage appearances as well. So this was the beginning of her career rise. What besides the exchange here really would suggest that this could be a period that she would begin to rise up? What? Anything about
the 10th.
Sounds like Roberto, or is this Peter?
Yes,
who's it?
that's Roberto.
Roberto, okay. So, those who have studied Jaimini know that we always want to be alert to major periods from where the AMK falls in the 10th house, Venus, which is what we see here, of course, planet of artistry. What really augments this? Venus is the AMK.
5 grahas aspect Taurus.
5 aspects.
Aspect on 2.
5.
No, not 5, just 3. Yeah, less than 5.
Right. Well, we'll come back to that, Ekaterina, but I'm
yes,
focusing on...
the 10th house from Taurus is aspected by 5 grahas.
Yes. Okay. Very good. We get a enormous number of grahas firing into that 10th house from Taurus, Aquarius. But since the AMK is there anything that you see that then really increases this indication of career rise during the Taurus major periods? Anybody see anything?
AMK PK, which is also the Moon-Venus combination.
Okay, now focus in particular on the Moon-Venus combination, right? Where, of course, the Moon has some strength here because it's in its own sign. But then, see what, she's performing. She's being a performer, right? So we see how from Taurus, we see the 3rd house becomes strong. It has its own lord, but it's also got the BK itself. And then you've got this Venus-Moon BK AMK combination that, because the Venus, for those of you who maybe don't have enough background in Jaimini, Venus and the Moon form a special Jaimini Raja, both kind of a Raja and Dan Yoga. And we see that combination here. But someone mentioned that we've got, additional Raja Yogas that Venus is forming because it's the AMK and has a mutual glance with the PK, Sun. What, anybody noticed anything special about this Sun?
It is almost at its full exaltation point. It's at 11 degrees, which is almost a degree higher.
Good, Rohit. Whenever we see an exalted planet, folks, you want to ask yourself the question, well, how exalted is it? And we see that by seeing how close it is to its actual, highest degrees of exaltation, something everyone should know. In which case, Rohit, correctly identified here that the Sun's at 1030 or whatever. It's 10 degrees is its highest point of exaltation. So it's an extremely exalted Sun, which is a relevant point here. But look at the who makes the exchange here, right? We've got Venus and Saturn, right? Venus as the AMK, as we've seen, and Saturn as the DK. Here's something that I'm researching and something that I'm seeing more and more evidence for, and I alluded to it in the article, The Guru's Clue. Some of the strongest ways in which 2 planets can be sambandha, can be connected, is through an exchange. And there's no Rashi Drishti between the AMK and the DK here. They're not conjunct, but they're in an exchange. So I believe that this would create an additional Jaimini Raja Yoga brought about by AMK DK here. And then, but given the fact that Taurus, given both given the Jaimini Karakas that Taurus contains, what other prediction might you make about the Taurus period?
Marriage or relationships.
Yes, absolutely. And the reason being, for those who maybe aren't as conversant in Jaimini, Roberto, why don't you state that?
Saturn DK is placed in Taurus, which
so
is...
DK, right, okay, good. So a planet with the lowest degrees in the chart, like unto the 7th Lord in the Jaimini system, is the DK, in this case Saturn, and here she is running a period containing this, and in actual fact, it was during this time that she met and moved in with and got into a marriage-like situation with a fellow actor, Elliot Gould. I'm not sure they actually married during this period, but certainly the relationship...
Very good, but you get the general.
Relationship certainly started then. If your microphone is active, we need to be silent or have silence in the background, or it creates some problems here, folks. Okay, so I want people to appreciate, you know, I love the Jaimini system, as you all know, and you know, I think you can appreciate, just looking at this, how very apparent, very clear, very straightforward it would be to be indicated that this Taurus period would coincide with a career rise. Now, shift your focus a little bit here. Make Cancer the Dasha Lagna. She's running now her Cancer period a little bit later. I believe it might have started in 72. How many years would the Cancer period be?
12.
Full 12 years, right? Because, you know, the Lord of the sign is in the sign, so quite a long period. And, you know, it's a matter of record that, you know, she just, you know, it was a tremendous period for her career-wise. Movie role after movie role, you know, hit song after hit song, album, concerts. You know, she was just an enormous star during this time. What then, you know, why would that be, and how could that be seen now? I mean, what happens here?
AMK aspects the 10th, and we've got the Sun, which is in the 10th from the Cancer Lagna.
So a lot of different things are going on, folks. You know, first of all, again, she's running a period containing the BK, BK of performance, right? She's running a period of a planet that has a planet in it that's the sign lord, right? And now, again, we see the influence of the AMK activating the Moon-Venus Raja Yoga, and the MKs, as Roberto just mentions, aspecting onto the 10th house, right? But then, and never miss this, folks, you know, we don't just use the Jaimini Chara Karakas, that is, you know, the special significations that planets take on based on their degrees, but we just also kind of use we also use planets as just, you know, what they naturally represent, their fixed Karaka status. And now we see that extremely exalted Sun, planet of stardom, planet of celebrity, now it's falling in the 10th house from there, right? With another natural benefic. Okay. So we see some, you know, pretty dramatic things going on that, again, easily reflects the kind of period the Cancer period was, you know, for her professionally, right?
Also the Argala from Jupiter and Saturn.
Okay, good. I was just about to ask about that. So whoever said that, I think it was Rui. Good thing to see. You know, when we are looking at Jaimini Raja Yogas, and I think I've made this point in articles and so on, one of the ways we qualify them, of course, is based on strength of planets. And you'll see that, you know, this Moon-Venus combination is particularly good because you'll see that, you know, the Moon's in its own sign in the birth chart, but then if you see her Navansha, right, you'll notice that Venus is strong in its own sign. So one way of qualifying that yoga is that we're going to have to see strength of planets, right, to see some sort of magnitude of result. But then another way we qualify them is by seeing Argala formation to any of these points that help support being locked down, as it were, the results of that Raja Yoga. And in the case of the Moon here, as we pointed out, in the 11th from there we have two planets, one natural benefic forming Argala at this point here. Any other observations before we move on here? The main point I want is...
by 4 planets.
who said this? Is that Venkat? Who said this? Who said it? I'm sorry?
Weber.
Oh, okay, very good. No, this is good. Yes, you know, the kind of the minimum thing we want to see here is 4 grahas, but, you know, I definitely accept this as being an additional reason why this Moon, and in particular the Cancer period, is giving the results that it has, because you've not only got the Moon-Venus combination, but you've got 4 grahas aspecting her Moon. So very good point. We have not discussed that, so I appreciate you mentioning that.
Mark,
Also, Mercury in the 10th house.
Okay, one thing at a time. One at a time here.
Mark, I have a question.
Okay, question?
Okay, so what I want to find out is just that, like we know that from the Karakamsha Lagna, if there is Mercury or Saturn in the 10th house, similarly, can we apply that same logic to like the Dasha Lagna and say that if Mercury or Saturn falls in the 10th, it's a period, it could be a good period?
Right. Good question, and my researches would suggest yes.
Okay.
Right? That my researches suggest that the combinations given in the Jaimini Sutras on the chapter of the effects of planets from Karakamsha Lagna can and should be applied dynamically. I actually, believe I've shown repeated examples of that, or what I consider to be repeated examples of that in the articles. But the answer is yes. Okay, so when of course she comes to her Leo period here, and Saturn in the 10th, and then when she ran her the moon period, of course Mercury was in the 10th from there. And what you're always wanting to see then is the additional influence of natural benefics onto those points. The Jaimini Sutra that talks about Mercury falling in the 10th from Karakamsha Lagna, making a person highly successful in whatever is their line of endeavor. The next sutra right after that indicates that if this planet has the additional influence of natural benefics, and that's going to be especially good, right? And there's a sutra that says if the 10th is falling, if the sun's falling strong in the 10th from Karakamsha Lagna and has the additional influence of natural benefics, then a person acquires a kingdom, the kind of statements you see in the classics. And, even, we talked about the Cancer period in the Argala onto Cancer. Do you see any Argala on the 10th house from there, Aries? This period that proved so spectacular to her when Aries became her 10th house. I mean, what do we see there?
Jupiter, Saturn from the second, and Venus. No, not Venus, because Mars will block that. So Jupiter and Saturn from the second house.
And what about from the 4th?
All right, Moon from the 4th.
Right.
And just to that, I want to add one more point. From the 4th, it becomes the Moon Venus, because I believe one of the sutra always also says that from a point, if Moon Venus aspect the 4th, that could be a special, just like Sun goes to the 10th, that is a special, has a special significance. Similarly, if Moon or Venus aspects the 4th, that
right.
has.
Well, what it's said to particularly give is one lives in a palace.
Right, right. Yeah.
One lives in a palace, and I suspect if you look at the kind of dwellings that she lived in, right, this would apply. Okay. So someone else had a comment there. Someone else had a question and/or a comment. Go ahead.
Actually, Jay asks, at a later time he would like to know where these planetary positions like Karakamsha Lagna are specified. Maybe how he...
Okay, so folks, I'm aware that we're doing Jaimini here, and those in the Jyotish Journey subscription program, not all of you are really conversant with Jaimini. I recommend my Jaimini courses, but Karakamsha Lagna is a special Lagna coming about by seeing the position of the planet with the highest degrees, the Atmakaraka, and where it falls in Navamsha. All right, so we see that our AK is Jupiter here. If we see its position in the Navamsha, I believe it goes to, it's going to fall in Virgo here. So this is a special Lagna that gets utilized. And why we're looking at that? Why we're looking at that? There's sutras that say when natural benefics fall in either the angles or trions from Karakamsha Lagna, then that can be an especially good sort of thing. Here, this is what we see. We see Jupiter in the Karakamsha Lagna. We see Venus in a trine from there. We're using Swamsha Lagna now. We're applying this Lagna to the Navamsha, which is something we do in Jaimini. We see Jupiter in the Karakamsha Lagna itself, natural benefic. We see Venus in the trine from there in its own sign, natural benefic. And the moon here must be counted as a natural benefic as well. given its relationship to the sun. So these are points that we use in the Jaimini system. But in terms of our discussion of the chart of Barbra Streisand and certain periods and what they gave, are there any questions or comments additionally regards that before we move on?
No, not in the panel. I don't see here.
Or from anyone else? Anyone else attending, you can either ask to have your mic activated, and Ekaterina will do that, or you can type a question. We want to, everyone has the opportunity to participate if they wish. But
Is the Mars-Mercury exchange as well?
Yes. Okay. Very good. And this is relevant. And let me tell you why. Her real first stardom, her career start happened in Taurus, but her real stardom began actually in her Gemini period, folks. I believe it was during this time that she appeared in her very first movie, Funny Girl, for which she immediately won the Oscar for Best Actress. This occurred in her Gemini period. And, one really, really good thing that's happening here is now the exchange between Mercury and Mars becomes a very favorable 1-11 exchange, right? And so, this is also a relevant point. But in the interest of, getting other charts that we want to look at here, I will move on now. Let me pull up the other chart, another chart I want to look at.
Hello, Mark. Everybody, I have a question. In regards this Parivarthana yoga and Jaimini. Does it show, for example, MK and DK, or Saturn DK and Venus MK exchange? That would be particular area she will be focused in her life. For example, in her career, partnership, like a Karakas, because of then Parivartana yoga, or just supports, like in particular Dasha, that is
well, I'm not sure I understand the question exactly, Lena, but I'm sorry. Could you just state it again? What are you asking? I'm not sure.
Okay, I'm asking. Let's say Venus and Saturn exchange.
Okay, she has the Venus. Okay, she has the Venus exchange, and they represent certain karakas. Okay.
Yeah. Does it show that in her life, this particular area, like Dara Karaka affairs, like relationship, and Amatya Karaka career, would be main focus in her life?
Just because those two karakas exchange?
Yes. Or no, or just or support, only supports like Raj Yoga, additional Raj Yoga.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that that indicates that then career and relationship took our focus. They're oftentimes a focus for everyone. I'm just saying that because those two planets that are exchanged are Jaimini Dara Karakas that form a Jaimini Raja Yoga, my contention is that then it forms an additional Raja Yoga. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Folks, I'm showing you here now the chart of Jack Nicholson, right? And another famous movie star. First of all, locate the exchange. What do you see here as being the two planets that form an exchange of signs? The reason I'm showing you this chart.
Jupiter, Saturn.
Jupiter, Saturn. And actually, folks, if you see in Vimshottari, when his main stardom came and has continued over a long period of time, you'll see it was in the 16-year period of Jupiter, followed by the 19-year period of Saturn. And what kind of exchange happens here for these planets, just from the Prashya point of view, regular birth logna? What kind of exchange is that?
It's a 7-9 exchange.
So what kind of yoga does that give?
Raja Yoga.
Raja Yoga. And then, of course, when we're seeing Raja Yoga, we always want to see it from what perspective then?
From the Lagna, from the moon.
from the moon, and now what kind of exchange does it become from the moon?
5-7.
5-7. Again, what kind of yoga is that?
Raja Yoga.
Raja Yoga. So you see here that the Saturn and Jupiter exchange becomes Raja Yoga, both from the birth lagna and from the Chandra lagna, which really helps ensure that these periods are going to give Raja Yoga, which of course they very much did, from the standpoint of Parashari and Shotri. And again, I just want to highlight, as I did in my article, an enigma wrapped in a mystery about certain conditions where debilitated planets do and can give good results. And here we see another perfect example where Jupiter falling in its debilitation sign, but he had huge stardom, huge fame and success in his Jupiter major period, not giving the results of the debilitated planet at all. And that's, in my view, is by virtue of the exchange. Okay? But again, for those people who know the calculation of Chara Dasha, it starts with Cancer. What direction does it go in? Anyone?
Indirect.
Indirect, because Cancer is one of those, actually the ninth from there is one of those even-footed signs, therefore it's indirect. So now come to the Aries period. How would you assess that Aries period from the Jaimini point of view, not based on the exchange, but just based on what you see with regards to Aries and everything that happens in the patterning of the chart from there?
It has an extremely exalted sun, which is at the highest point of its exaltation.
Okay. Actually, folks, this is even better than Barbra Streisand's sun.
Yeah.
Better because it's applying to its highest point of exaltation, which is the point at which it's most powerful. It hasn't crossed 10 degrees yet. It's going in that direction, right?
It's Dikbala.
It also gets Dikbala. It's in its extreme exaltation, and it's also gets Dikbala. You'll not find, folks, many suns like this. And the point I make in my Jaimini class is that when you're running the major period in Jaimini, Chara Dasha, or any sign-based Dasha in Jaimini, and it contains a strong sun, this, I don't care what Karaka is, I don't care whatever other yogas it forms, this alone produces a period where a person shines more. They stand out more. They become more of a star, as it were. Of course, if it does additionally form Jaimini Raja Yogas, and there are other good things going on, then that indication is all the more so. What else is good about, and first I want people to note that this sun is the BK. Okay? Like unto the third lord of performance, we saw in the case of Barbra Streisand, she has a moon as in its own sign as her BK. In other words, a good condition of her BK. And now we see in the chart of Jack Nicholson, his BK is this extremely exalted sun getting Dikbala in the 10th. You'll also see the third lord in the 10th from the birth lagna, a typical combination that you see when a person is a professional performer of some sense. But what else is good about this sun here and about the Aries period in general? Anybody?
AK, AMK, DK, AMK. So
okay. So we've got major Raja Yogas going on here, folks. Some of you are aware that one of the most powerful Jaimini Raja Yogas is when there is a combination between the AK, planet with the highest degrees, and Amatya Karaka, planet with the second highest degrees. And again, this combination is formed not by planetary aspect, by what's called Rashi Drishti, sign aspect, where movable signs Aries are going to be aspected by the fixed signs Taurus. The fixed signs like in Scorpio, except for the one next to it, Taurus. So we've got multiple Jaimini Raja Yogas going on, but again, how would we qualify this yoga? How would we assess the magnitude of results it might give anyone? Someone other than maybe Rohit this time.
Mars is in own sign, is very strong, and Mars also is fifth lord, additional Raja Yoga.
Very good, Lena. Very good. Mars has a double capacity here to form Jaimini Raja Yogas because not only is it the AMK, but it's the fifth lord, and as she noted, it becomes very strong here in its own sign. Now, any other sources of strength here in planets that are influencing the 10th house?
I believe Mercury is Vargottama. I think Mercury is Vargottama.
There's a Vargottama planet here, Rohit, but it's not Mercury. But nice try.
Sun is the fifth lord as well from the Dasha Lagna.
From Dasha Lagna, okay. Sun's the fifth lord, right? Good. Look at the degrees of Venus, folks.
Venus Vargottama, yeah.
Venus is Vargottama. Right?
Venus is sorry, my bad.
Yeah. So now think about this, folks. You know, the sun is in its extreme exaltation. It's with two natural benefics, right? You know, one of which is Vargottama. It gets the aspect of the AMK Mars, who is strong in its own sign, right? And you know, those who have taken the Jaimini classes, what do we know when a sign gets the influence of either Mercury or Jupiter, or both? You know, just that fact alone, what do we know about that?
It basically can be a very good period.
Strengthens the sign.
Powerful. It empowers the sign.
Yeah,
Secondary strength.
Secondary strength strengthens the sign. I'm glad people are remembering this. But you know, it even gets better than that, folks. Whenever you see a Raja Yoga of any kind, whether it be a Parashari Raja Yoga or whether it be a Jaimini Raja Yoga, what's one thing we should always do immediately?
To check Navamsha.
By its own lord.
Check the Navamsha.
Check the Navamsha. Check the condition of these planets in the Navamsha, right? And so when we do that, all right, whoops, that's still the Rashi there. When we do that, what do we, besides Venus being Vargottama, what else do we note about it? Is anything
aspected by Moon and Jupiter.
Exchange with Mars.
The exchange. This is what I wanted you to see, folks. These planets get additional underlying strengths. Both of them, remember, Mars is in its own sign in the birth chart. Venus is Vargottama. And now we see these two planets involved in an exchange in the Navamsha. And then, you know, there's multiple additional Jaimini Raja Yogas going here. The Moon-Venus, you know, combination is one here. But mostly what I wanted to see is how in the Navamsha, Mars-Venus get additional support, additional level of strength here. So some of you may be familiar with kind of an iconic movie from the late 60s called Easy Rider. This is kind of what first catapulted Jack Nicholson to initial fame as an actor. Right? But now, what would follow the Aries period here? Sorry.
I'm saying there's one additional thing that we missed, Mark, I think, which was all the benefits. All the benefits are falling in Kendra from the Aries period.
No, it's a very relevant point. Good for you, Rory. You know, I'm going to give you the first virtual chocolate of the day for that. But you know, explain why that. You know, based on the sutra, explain why that is a relevant point.
The Kendras are, I believe, the pillars of the basic pillars of the horoscope, and anytime you have benefics falling in Kendra, it just empowers the entire horoscope, right. I guess.
Exactly.
Saraswati Yoga.
Well, yes, of course, it's a Saraswati Yoga. Very good. You know, we're not analyzing this chart necessarily from the Parashara point of view, but it's a very good observation, and one of the main reasons, and with planets having great strength, a lot of them. One of the reasons this man is, you know, was involved in an artistic-related career. But coming back to Rohit's point before we miss it here, you know, there's a Jaimini Sutra that says when, you know, when the angle houses from Karakamsha Lagna, it contain nothing but benefics. You know, again, sort of a man acquires a kingdom or becomes a king. And, you know, we have the sun here, but, you know, that's actually sort of a favorable factor. But from the period that when he was dynamically running, of course, that pattern exists from the birth login itself, right? Cancer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know, of course, when he's running his Aries period, it exists again. It'll exist again when he runs his Capricorn period, right? And so, you were asking me earlier, can we apply that, you know, idea of, you know, Mercury and Saturn falling in the 10th from Karakamsha? Can we apply it dynamically from Dasha Lagna? And my answer was yes. And we should also be applying that combination dynamically. This idea of natural benefics falling in the Kendras. So, you know, this is an excellent point that I'm glad you brought up. Now, you know, when he was getting his initial fame, from the standpoint of Vimshotri, it was Rahu. What strikes you about that? Anyone? We're doing Parashari Jyotish now. He gets initial fame in the Rahu major period as an actor.
Rahu will give the result of Mars, the first-rate yoga karaka for Cancer Lagna.
Okay, so that's a pretty easy sort of thing, right?
And I hope Jupiter in 3rd house in exchange with 5th house Saturn. From Rahu, Jupiter in 3rd house.
I see, yeah, the exchange becomes a 3-5 exchange is what you're saying from Rahu, okay. But, you know, just from the standpoint of Vimshotri and the use of the Vimshotri Dasha and doing it in the Parashari here, you know, I'm switching back and forth, and we could see how Rahu can bring good success, a certain level of fame, as Rohit pointed out, because it's now Rahu giving the results of the Yoga Karaka Mars, strong in its own, you know, 5th house. But, you know, using Vimshotri and Parashari, maybe how you could see that specifically this fame could come from a performance, from, you know, being an actor. In a way
Rahu is in Mercury,
in the 10th house.
Nakshatra is in Nakshatra of Mercury, Jyeshta.
Okay, you know, good point, Lena. You know, I've emphasized that, you know, when we're examining a major period lord in Vimshotri, we want to see the nakshatra, in which case it's Yestra, ruled by Mercury, in which case we're activating the Saraswati Yoga, we're activating the idea of the 3rd lord in the 10th from the birth lagna, showing the acting, and of course, you know, kind of the results these planets are giving, all what we said previously. Somebody was about to make another point there. Anyway.
Yeah, so Mark, I was saying the 3rd Lord Mercury is in the 10th house with Sun. Yes. Exalted Sun.
Right, that's exactly right. That shows the you know, from a static potential, and that got activated in Rahu, as Nina pointed out, because Rahu is in Mercury's nakshatra. See it from the moon, folks. See it from the moon.
Yeah.
What do we notice?
3rd Lord in the 3rd house.
Now Rahu and Mars go to the 3rd house, with Mars as the 3rd lord in the 3rd house. And you know, just this idea that you know, strong malefics in 3, 6, and 11 can you know, give some Raja Yoga type quality. It's better if natural benefics are actually in the angle of them from there. But you know, this is the way this can be seen. And then, you know, in Vimshotri moved into his Jupiter period and all of what we've said about that. But then, you know, this coincided with him moving into his Pisces period. And, you know, there's some important points to be seen here as to why the Pisces period actually even produced a greater level of stardom. I believe it would have been during this period that he, let me check my notes here, hold on. Jack. You know, he had his you know, first Oscar for the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest in March 1976. It coincided with Pisces Virgo. Okay, Pisces Virgo. But just start with Pisces here. See anything good about this period? It's especially good from a Jaimini point of view, and given the lesson that I'm giving here in the Guru's Clue, what good thing happens from Pisces here?
It's a 211 exchange, and also the Argala.
Okay, so let's give somebody else a chance here. Is somebody else going to say something else? We'll come back to that point.
It's a 110 exchange. From Pisces, Jupiter, and Saturn, they become 110 exchange.
111.
Look at that again. Yeah, you're on the right.
They're both there.
You're on the right track.
The signs.
It becomes a 111 exchange, folks. Yeah, which is still very good exchange. 111 exchange from there. See any other way in which Pisces really has some benefit from the Jaimini point of view?
Amatyakaraka Mars.
Go ahead, Giresh, go ahead.
Yeah, the Amatyakaraka Mars it's in its own house in the 9th.
So what would be good about that? What's the principle that we're using here? That's a very, very, very correct statement, but why is that good?
Argala.
It's like receiving the aspect of like Sun, Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter. So Jupiter, Mercury, and the Lord of that house is aspecting that particular house and sign. So I think that's a very good.
No, you're right. But what I wanted to emphasize is that in what I've taught most of you, a lot of you took my Jaimini courses, that we want to see signs containing the AMK, but then also signs from Dasha Lagna where AMK is falling in the 11th, the 10th, or the 9th. General principle is that these periods, all the things being equal, can be particularly good, and particularly good, of course, if the Matyakaraka is involved in additional Jaimini Raja Yogas and is strong, which is what we see here. So, very correct statement, Giresh. I'm glad you highlighted that. But there's something we're missing here, haven't been mentioned so far, that really boosts up the quality of Pisces.
The Argala.
Yes, yes. Everyone focus in on the idea of Argala. Again, for those who maybe don't have as much background in Jaimini, we're looking for planets in the 2nd, the 4th, or the 11th from there, particularly natural benefics, strong, and in which they don't get obstruction from obstructing houses, which would be the 12th house for the 2nd, the 10th house for the 4th, and the 3rd house from the 11th Argala. So look at this, folks. From the 2nd there, we've got Venus and Mercury, and bear in mind Venus's strength. And then we've got Jupiter, the other natural benefic. All the benefics are forming Argala is the point, along with an extremely exalted sun. And think about then what happens to the 2nd and the 11th houses from there, just from this period being one that can bring really, really good financial fortune. He's making, millions. When you win the Oscar, your asking price per picture goes up by millions. That's just what happens. And so, Pisces itself does not contain planets that form Raja Yogas. Raja Yogas are not forming in the 10th from there, but we have a very favorable 111 exchange, and we have these very benefic Shubha Argalas that are forming from there. We've got the Amatyakaraka falling in the 10th. Additional questions or comments about that?
I think Saturn in the 1st house is also like considered to be good for the profession, like in Jaimini.
According to some
interpretation,
according to some interpretation, yeah, I will accept that, Giresh. I think that's a relevant comment.
Jay had a question. When we talk about Jupiter-Saturn exchange, and actually he says that there are also the 6th and 8th wards. So how do you know that actually he asks this, I mean, that they will be,
So I understand the question, I think, Trina.
so good, yeah.
Right. I understand the question, but you have to see, earlier we saw they are the 6th and the 8th lords, right? But it's not an exchange between the 6th and the 8th lords. It's an exchange between the 7th and 9th lords. And that exchange is a good Raja Yoga forming exchange from both the birth lagna, Cancer, and the moon lagna, Virgo. So, they're going to give those Raja Yoga results as being exchanges between an angle and trine lord, even though they're also the, the 8th lord and the 6th lord as well, right? So, that's the way I would answer that question. Okay, so now he comes to his Aquarius period, folks. What happens from here?
In 10th house.
Now look at the 3rd house. Now look at the the 10th house and the 3rd house from there. All these Raja Yogas performing between the planets in Aries, and all the good things that are happening between the planets of Aries and the planets in Scorpio here, with, as someone just mentioned, the additional aspect of Jupiter onto the 10th from there. They start. It's a very, very spectacular picture. Jack Nicholson has enjoyed a stardom here for decades. Starting back in the late 60s, and just went on and on for decades. And so you see how, from the Jaimini point of view, he was running consecutive periods that are all very, very favorable, in terms of bringing this kind of stardom. But switching over to the Parashara system, all right. Now he won his, he won this Oscar that I mentioned, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I believe he won the Oscar in early 1976. I told you it was Pisces Virgo in the Dasha system, right? Now in the Parashara system, it was Jupiter, Venus. Okay. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted you to guess which. Hold on here. Well, take a look at the Venus-Jupiter period from the standpoint of his Dashamsha, and what strikes you about that? He won his first Oscar in the major period of Jupiter, subperiod of Venus. You're looking
Venus
at
is at the Lagna of D10.
It's in mutual aspect in the 1-7 axis.
Right. Okay. So the first thing I want you to see is that both planets are in angle houses.
And 7-9 Raj Yoga.
Yep.
Okay. Good. So everybody's seeing it. Lots of things going on here. First of all, it's the major period lord is Jupiter. It's falling in an angle house. Right? Good placement in D10. It's, gets the additional influence of a natural benefic here, strong, Vargotama, relative to this divisional chart as well, who happens to be the dispositor also of Jupiter. And, these two planets, it's the period and subperiod of two planets very sambandha, very connected. And I've emphasized the point when using the divisional charts that when you're running the period and subperiod of two planets very strongly connected in a particular division, that period and subperiod usually proves very significant in terms of bringing developments related to whatever that division is. Here it's related, of course, to the Dashamsha, and therefore to his career life. And Rohit mentioned Venus is in the Lagna, and I've taught in my articles that planets falling in the Dashamsha Lagna, or the Lagna of any division, then can give strongly the results, again, related to that division, particularly if they have some source of strength, which this one does, being Vargotama relative to this division. So, using these principles, one could see how the Venus sub-period within the Jupiter major period really, would be a special period, would prove a special period. But, going back to the Rashi, in terms of this idea of yogas show what and dashas show when, what's another way in which this Jupiter-Venus period could be predictable that way? bear in mind what...
Saraswati Yoga.
Absolutely. It's the Saraswati Yoga, folks, that's being activated here, right? Remember, the components of the Saraswati Yoga are Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury. And so it's the period and sub-period of two planets that are forming the Saraswati Yoga. And again, it's a perfect illustration. All these planets give good yogas. Both these planets are involved in good yogas. And so it's besides the Saraswati Yoga. So it's a perfect illustration, again, of the idea of yoga showing what, Dasha showing when he wins an Academy Award, Artistic Award, in his Jupiter-Venus period. Questions or comments about that?
Mark, would you say that the Virinchi Yoga applies in this chart?
Well, the Virinchi Yoga is where Jupiter and Saturn and the fifth lord are all in angles and trines and have some source of strength. And, I would say, certainly the structure of it and the definition of it and even the idea of planets having some strength apply here. As I hope I've commented, that this can be a yoga that can incline one towards spiritual life, but it will only do so in a context of a chart as a whole that shows that kind of promise. Right? Now, I don't know anything about Jack Nicholson's orientation that way. I don't get the impression that it's real strong. It's good to be aware of those yogas, but it's also good to understand the context in which they will have that meaning that I've emphasized. Right? I mean, this is a very different Virinchi sitting in a context that's very different, extremely different from that of, say, Ramakrishna Paramahansa.
Right.
But it's a good and interesting question. By the way, just parenthetically, those of you who have read, and you should all have read my article, that Yogaj combination, right, where I've talked about how Rahu-Venus or Venus-Rahu periods can not only be very significant as far as bringing fated love affairs into your life, maybe even leading to marriage, but they can just very often mark very special periods in a person's life, sometimes very life-defining, where people have life-defining type of experiences. And it all depends upon the Venus and the Rahu here, but just to mention that this breakout role that he had that started to really make him a star in the movie Easy Rider in 1969, this happened in his Rahu-Venus period. So it's another example of that sort of idea that these periods and sub-periods can prove under the right, in certain horoscopes, given the Rahu and Venus, very significant, sometimes life-defining times. Okay.
Mark, can we say that this Rahu is, I mean, we've spoken about the qualities like it is in Mercury's nakshatra and everything, but I think there's another point that I think there's a very strong Nich Bhang Raj Yoga associated with this Rahu, which empowers it even further. Do you
just go ahead and say something about that. What are you seeing? What's the point that you're making?
Rahu is debilitated in Scorpio.
It has a debilitation in Scorpio, according to Parashar. There are some people who would argue that, but that's what I take. Yes.
Yeah. So now, based on that, it is we have other sources of strength, like it is in a trine house aspected by a trine and an angle lord, which is the strength. But the Nich Bhang Raj Yoga, where its depositor is in with Rahu itself, I think that is an addition.
I see what you're saying now. Yes, the kind of results that Rahu is going to be able to give here, and this is true of the nodes in general, is really its close association to Mars, strong in its own sign as the Yogacaraka planet, and as the third lord in its own sign from the moon. Mm-hmm. And it's just so clear. Fame is an actor, right? It's just so very clear and obvious. If you understand these basic, classical, simple principles of Jyotish. So,
but also we have to see Navamsha. In Navamsha it should be strong, Rahu.
Well, we can look at it in Navamsha, right? And here we see, it doesn't have any particular special dignity here, right? Degrees mean nothing here, folks. It's just what the program is showing here. You know, the point, the way we see Rahu giving the results that it did, and you know, his major stardom did not come in this period by any means, right? It began here. Like many actors, he struggled for a period of time, but it did eventually give Raja Yoga, and it gave Raja Yoga as one would expect it would, you know, in starting with Rahu Venus, and then of course, you know, Rahu Mars is the last sub-period, right? Within
yes.
The Rahu major period. Of course, you'll see if you go back and you examine that period and you know things, performances he was engaged in, and he was becoming more of a star during that time. Okay, so again, in the interest of you know looking at some additional charts, I'm going to table the discussion on this one here, and because I want to bring up the chart of Queen Elizabeth, all of whom you guys have you know seen before, but now you know we want to look at it in a little different way than we have.
In the meantime, I just want to read a comment here by Radhika. She says that in Navamsha, Rahu is hemmed by benefics. In
you know, let's look at that. You know, let's look at that. It is okay. So you know, it does have that favorable condition in Navamsha, which you know certainly might be relevant to, especially as a natural malefic falling in the 6th house with those benefics on each side of it. Then you know that could definitely be a relevant thing. Okay, you know, while I'm finding this chart, folks, if there's other questions or comments that you want to give to Ekaterina, she'll take those. I'm having a little difficulty finding the chart of Queen Elizabeth here. Hold on. Where do I have this? But I need to get their chart up with Karakas, so now I know where it is, though. All right. So now, what's the famous exchange in the chart of Queen Elizabeth?
Mars, Saturn.
111 exchange brought about by Mars and Saturn. What is particularly powerful and significant about this exchange? Anything?
Mars is exalted and has nearly top exaltation, 1 degree only apart from top exaltation.
Well, actually just 2 minutes away from being at its 6 degrees is this most extreme point of exaltation, and you won't find many Mars in the chart of people with this degree right at 28.2 here. Now it's a highly favorable exchange for wealth, of course, from the birth lagna. What kind of exchange is it from the moon?
5-7.
Right, so it's again a favorable exchange. You know, when you're seeing exchanges in the chart, you want to see if they, what kind of exchanges they form in terms of yogas based on house lordship, and whether that continues to be the case. Good house lord exchange from both the birth lagna and the moon, and that's what, of course, we saw in the case of Jack Nicholson, his Jupiter Saturn. Now we see it here in the case of Mars-Saturn. But I want to focus in on the period when she became queen. Her coronation took place in June 1953. It was a major period of Cancer, folks. Major period of Cancer. What strikes you about that?
Sun in the 10th house, exalted.
Very good.
Aspected by Saturn.
And Moon-Venus yoga also.
Well,
yeah.
one thing at a time here. It's very obvious that from there, the 10th planet of royalty is extremely exalted, moving to its highest point of exaltation. You know, still 3 degrees or less than 3 degrees away, but moving towards that. Extremely exalted sun goes to the 10th. And, you know, we noted the additional aspect of Saturn, but really one of the more relevant ones here is the aspect of the benefic Venus onto this point as well, right? But what about just Cancer itself? What do you see about Cancer itself that's notable as far as a position that can, a period that can really put a person in a very high position?
It's the Matrikaraka in the first house, and it's in its own house, 4th lord.
Okay, what else?
Asana, like seat of power, like the Matrikaraka is equivalent to that.
Okay, okay. So he's indicating that the throne or the seat of power is represented by the 4th house, which in the Jaimini system is represented by the MK, and so the idea that she acquired a throne in her period, Dasha period containing MK, is relevant from that standpoint. But what a lot of people run the period of the MK. What's particularly good about this one?
Moon is very strong, is in own sign.
Moon is very strong in its own sign. That's one point. But the larger point, think of the chart of Barbra Streisand. How does this chart have a similarity?
Oh, Moon-Venus combination, yoga.
Yes. You see this, folks? You've got the Moon-Venus combination. Barbra Streisand had her Moon in Cancer and her Venus in Aquarius, and we see the same thing here. And so, this Raja Yoga is applying there, and it was in her Moon period that, this contains this Raja Yoga, or from one of the signs from where this Raja Yoga emanates, is when she became queen. Of course, Sun falling in the 10th from there, getting to both directional strength and also being extremely exalted is a part of that, right? Any other relevant point here that anyone sees?
Mars.
Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. One at a time. Rohit, why don't you go, and then we have Lena's comment.
We can, since you said that we can also take the karakas, not only the sthir, we can take the sthir karakas as one of the elements as well. So Mars, which represents land and property,
right, is
extremely exalted there. So I mean, I believe that could be an additional point.
Well, the fact that she, the royal family owns some of the, most expensive real estate in England, maybe in the world, right? And the fact that she's been so fortunate this way in her life is certainly indicated by having a 4th lord in its extreme exaltation, from where it also aspects onto its own house, right? Mm-hmm. So that is a relevant point as to what indications that she has this kind of karma. But we're talking about the Cancer period making her queen. Okay. First of all, come back to one of the key points of the article, The Guru's Clue. What did we see happen from what happens to the exchange from Cancer?
It's the 5-7 exchange. It's the 5th house of Raja.
It becomes a very favorable exchange, right? With the 5th lord of Raja from there, being that Mars in its extreme exaltation, along with another natural benefic, who gets, of course, its debilitation a couple times over, right? Do people see this? But now, come to the fact that it was that she was crowned queen in the sub-period of Libra. What strikes you about that?
The fourth house from there.
Why?
It's a 2-4 exchange, which is extremely beneficial for property.
Well, yes, but first of all, what happens to the 10th house from Libra?
Yeah, moon.
That has MK moon in
Moon
the
and
10th
all
house. And the moon-Venus combination in the 10th house.
Right. She's running the major period of Cancer that gets the influence of the moon-Venus Raja Yoga, but now, sub-period of Libra, the moon falls in the 10th in that yoga, a 10th from there. Now, Giresh brought up the idea of the fourth house representing what Sri Rao always referred to as the Simhansa, meaning the seat of the line, which is an allusion to a seat of power, seat of the throne. Look what happens to the fourth house from there, Libra. She literally sat on the throne in the Libra sub-period for the first time.
Libra also has the Aruda of the fourth house.
Well, that's a good and additional point, but you're staying for the moment here. What's the best Jaimini Raja Yoga? One of the best Jaimini Raja Yogas?
KMK.
And where does it fall from Libra?
Fourth.
In the fourth house. And seeing these strengths of planets.
And the exchange is with the fifth lord, Saturn.
It is. It is. It is. So, but here's a point that I may not have made for those of you who took my Jaimini classes. Over and over again, I'm seeing people acquire, when the AMK falls in the 7th and is involved in good Jaimini Raja Yogas and has a source of strength. I'm sort of collecting, and I'll publish a research about this at one point. I'm collecting a lot of examples. I find this period over and over again to be times when a person reaches great heights. It's not that idea of the Amayakaraka falling in the 11th, 10th, or 9th, but I'm seeing that when it's falling in the 7th over and over again, again under the right conditions, it's really giving the person, raising them up high. So you can kind of look for that.
It would be because of like the 7th house being the 10th from the 10th.
Yes, that would be my logical Jyotish principle explanation, Yuresh. And I don't, I'm not ready to make it a an invariable interpretive principle, but I'm just seeing just a lot of evidence for this. I could cite and show to you many examples. Again, strength of planets. We saw that in the case of Barbra Streisand, she had her moon in its own sign. But Venus also had a source of strength in her chart. It was involved in an exchange, number 1. And in number 2, we saw that it was in its own sign in Navamsha. Look at the Venus of Queen Elizabeth in Navamsha. Tell me what you notice. Oh, wait a second. I'm not seeing what I thought I expected to see. Anyway, I'll forget that point then. All right. So this is what I wanted to comment with regards to the chart of Queen Elizabeth. Any questions on anything we've said about her chart and it's this situation here?
Mark, I have a question. I had emailed you about this, and it applies to this chart, planetary war. Can you just emphasize a little bit on that, please?
Well, first of all, let me say that there will be an article at some point in the Jyotish Journey, Jyotish Journey subscription program, where I'll go into my researches with regards planetary war. It's a tricky thing in the sense that it's not considered in the tradition a favorable thing, and part of my take on it is that just like in a real war, both parties, both nations, both individuals suffer. It's the same. Same can be said for planets in a planetary war. what's also true, and I can show you example after example, if the planets in some way form good yogas and they have other sources of strength, as we see here, you won't find a planetary war destroying the results of the yogas that those planets can bring. They may deteriorate someone's. They may not be as strong or may not be as favorable as they maybe would otherwise if they weren't involved in a planetary war. So those are some things I'm going to say about it preliminarily. But if you have some patience for Rohit and others, so that I am going to publish my researches about this more. Okay. But some preliminary sort of comment about that.
Mark, but on top, this one is Gandanta as well, planetary war and Gandanta.
Who's Gandanta here?
Like planets, they are the last degrees?
No. Well, I think you mean a Sandhi. You mean they're at a Sandhi.
Yeah, Sandhi, yeah.
Sandhi borderline between two positions. Yes,
yeah.
They are. They are. But this is, I've said it before, I've said it in my articles, I've said it in our presentations here. What Jyotish requires you to do, and the phrase used in Parashara is Urapurapatu, which means to, weigh up different factors. And certain factors trump other factors in my researches. So you have the idea of Mars here at its most extreme point of exaltation. The fact that it also falls in a Sandhi, which is not said to be a favorable sort of thing, the fact that it's at the most extreme point of exaltation totally trumps, that idea, that it totally supersedes it. And, in my one article, I think I was talking about this with regards to Vargotama planets that are going to be at the very earliest degrees, to stay for the Vargota position of the Sun. Very early, first 3 degrees of Aries, said to be, a Gandanta position, a worse Sandhi. But you won't find that planet giving anything other than very, very strong results. So you have to weigh up. In fact, a planet might be involved in a number of conditions, some highly favorable, some unfavorable, and then you have to sift through and see which is going to predominate here. And you can't just go blindly by one certain principle. You have to any astrological judgment I once heard it said is kind of a delicate blend of many ingredients, just like a fine cup of Indian chai, and it's the same thing here. So this is how I would respond to such a question. Once more, comments or anything else before we move on here?
There is a question by Jay about Venus-Moon combination, and he asks.
Venus-Moon.
Venus-Moon combination, yes. He asks,
okay.
Does Venus-Moon combination apply if they both aspect a particular sign? For example, if Moon is in Leo and Venus is in Taurus, they don't have a Jaimini aspect, but they both aspect on Libra. Can we apply Venus-Moon combination? He wants to clarify.
Yeah, the answer is no. In Parashara we have Graha yogas, the yogas that are formed by not house lordship, but by the fact that certain planets, like a Saraswati yoga, have a certain condition or placed and so forth. One type of Jaimini Graha yoga is the Moon-Venus combination, which can form sort of both a Raja and Dana yoga. But in order to do so, they have to be associated. And the associations that produce this are the exchange, in my experience, the conjunction, and the Rashi Drishti. They must be in some of the best Jaimini Moon-Venus combinations will also fall 311 from each other. That's not the case here in the chart of Barbra Streisand or in Queen Elizabeth that we've looked at, but say like with Gwyneth Paltrow, and I can cite others, you'll see them also falling 311 from each other. But they need to be sambandha, conjunct, exchange, or Rashi Drishti. Otherwise, it's just the double influence of Venus, a natural benefic, and maybe a benefic moon falling onto a sign, which could be good for that sign, but it's not giving the Moon-Venus Jaimini Raja yoga. Okay? All right, we're going to move on here. I also wanted to look at the chart of another actress, or no, actually, you know, I've been showing the chart of James Garner here, the old TV and movie star from 50s, 60s, for a number of reasons, illustrating different things. I want to show it again here. There's a lot that can be taught about Jyotish using his chart, both from the Parashara and the Jaimini point of view. So the first thing I want to ask people about that's of notable interest here, he first became, you know, and Rohit, this relates to your question here, right? He first became, you know, sort of a major TV star and then got into, you know, movie stardom in his Mercury major period, right? And, you know, you'll see that Mercury's in its debilitation sign, but you'll see how close it is to Venus.
Yep.
Again, involved in a planetary war. Now, I believe Mercury actually wins the war here, but even so, we've got planets involved. Yet, you know, the Mercury period, even though it's debilitated, involved in a planetary war, it produced a really good level of success and stardom. And, you know, we need to understand why that's the case. Because if you just, you know, if you're a first-year student and you hear about planetary war, you hear about debilitation, and you look at this Mercury, you say, okay, it's a bad period. Can't give very good results, which would be completely wrong. Now, there's a lot of different reasons for this. And it's, again, the idea of some principles superseding other principles. Now, my contention is that it might have given even better results if it weren't in this planetary war, but it didn't prevent it from giving the results of the many, many powerful and strong yogas that it's involved in, right? Nichabanga Yoga, Saraswati Yoga, Major Raja Yogas, Chandra Adi Yoga, Adi Yoga, and, I've detailed these and things that you've all read, the many benefic yogas that this, but what's really been always interesting to me about this chart, because it illustrates one particular yoga that's easy to miss. You know, his initial stardom came in the Mercury major period. Of course, Mercury's followed by Ketu, and then in the mid-70s, I think starting in 1974, he was starred in another big hit TV series, this TV series called The Rockford Files. And how is it that Ketu is giving, sort of major success Raja Yoga here? Does anybody see how?
Saturn-Mars exchange.
Mars exchange.
Okay, good. I see people have gotten the point. From here, of course, Ketu is giving the results of Saturn, and there's a very favorable exchange from Dasha Lagna here between Mars and Saturn. But there's another major reason here, and Ekaterina, I'm going to give you a hint.
Yes. No. I was about to say that yoga.
Okay. Let others try first. I knew you would know this. Okay. But let others try first. Is there any? You see any other yogas? Is what I'm referring to here. There's a yoga that applies here.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Ketu acts like nine lord from Lagna Dasha. From Mercury Dasha. Ketu is in 9th house and acts like 9th lord Mars.
No, well, hold on. It's in the Ketu major period that I'm interpreting, not Mercury.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay.
Mark, isn't there if all the Dushtanas exchange signs, isn't that supposed to be a Raj Yoga as well? If there's an exchange between Dushtana.
Not just by itself. Okay, I mean, if all Dushtana lords are falling in Dushtana houses, you get this Viparit Raja Yoga quality, right?
Right, but here what I'm saying is there's an exchange between two Dushtanas.
There is, but this alone is not going to give Raja Yoga, in my experience.
Okay. Well, then it's 1/3 exchange, 1st and 3rd house exchange, Saturn-Mars from Ketu.
Well, from Ketu, it's a 1/4 exchange. I mean, the 3rd lord's involved, but it's a 1/4 exchange. And that's part of the explanation, folks, that what kind of results the K2 period give, but really to understand why basically this K2 period gave Raja Yoga, just in the same way that the Mercury period did, but in an unusual sort of way. I'm just going to give maybe just a few more seconds if anyone can recognize it. Then I knew Ekaterina would recognize it because it applies to her chart. And we'll let her weigh in here.
K2 is exalted.
Sorry?
And K2 is exalted and it's involved in a Raja Yoga like with the Saturn-Mars exchange. So I think that's one thing.
Goresh, you're right. K2 is in its exaltation sign, that's the one. And from Dasha Lagna, as we've talked about, the exchange becomes 1-4. And that certainly contributed to why this K2 period gave what it gave. But Ekaterina, why don't you...
Then, so 10th Lord Sun is in 5th house, is in royal seat.
Oh, okay, so, you know, the patterning of the chart, folks, becomes very good from K2. No question.
An aspect of Jupiter.
The Saraswati Yoga all falls in the 5th house from there. It includes the 10th Lord Sun, as Lena just pointed out. So yes, applying Dasha Lagna here to Scorpio, there is good astrological explanation as to why this period gave what it gave. But, you know, I really emphasize this idea, and those of you who are taking my Graha Yoga video subscription program, you know, this whole idea of Dasha, or Yoga show what and Dasha show when. It's a perfect illustration of this, but you have to be able to see and understand the yoga. Go ahead, Ekaterina, why don't you explain it here?
Yeah, at the chapter of Raja Yogas in Brihad Parashara Hora Shastra, at the end of the list, there is a yoga in which Ketu participates. All benefics in Kendras. We see here Venus, Mercury, Jupiter in the 7th house. So benefics in Kendras and malefics in 3rd, 6th, and 11th houses. And we see Ketu and Saturn in the 3rd, Mars in the 6th. Well, Moon is in the 2nd, but as a whole, this yoga applies. So Ketu,
yes.
that Raja Yoga, yeah.
Very good explanation. This Ketu is giving the result of that Raja Yoga. It's actually the last one mentioned, as Ekaterina just said, in the chapter on Raja Yogas in Parashara Hora. And it's defined when all the natural benefics go to the Kendras, which we see here. And there's a predomination of natural malefics in 3, 6, and 11, where the houses they can give better results anyway. There's no natural malefics here in the 11th, so it's not an absolutely pure yoga this way, but there's the natural malefics in the 6th house and the 3rd house. Particularly, there's an exchange between them as well, and Ketu is giving the results of all of this, and therefore, you know, you see this applying in particular, and this is one of the main reasons, among others that we just mentioned, that the Ketu period can also bring Raja Yoga. You wouldn't be able to see the degree it's going to give Raja Yoga unless you were able to see this yoga, which is why I so emphasize the ability to identify these yogas in a birth chart to understand what a major period can bring. Now, he actually won an Emmy Award. It's kind of like the equivalent of an Oscar for someone who's starring in a TV show. Any ideas about what might have been a sub-period in which this would have happened? I'm going to show you the Dashamsha. Okay, so why would you have said that?
Yeah, because Jupiter is involved in multiple Raja Yogas, like one is the Mukuta Yoga and the second is the Hamsa Yoga.
Okay. Are
And
you talking,
Jupiter
you're talking from the birth lagna, or are you talking from
yeah,
Chandra
from the birth
lagna?
lagna.
Just a second here. I wanted to get a view up here that I lost. Just one moment. And we need to see degrees here as well, along with karakas. Hold on. One moment. I'm not sure why I lost my screen, but I did. Okay. So all your points, Girish, was relevant. I'm going to show you now the chart also, if I can get it up here, the Dashamsha. that, you know, you might have take a look at as well this way.
I would say Ketu Venus or Ketu Moon. Ketu Moon rather.
So Ketu Moon, all right, that's one idea. What look at the Shamsha now. Is there anything that would strike you about Ketu Jupiter?
Yeah, Ketu is in the sign of Jupiter. Jupiter is its dispositor, and Jupiter is exalted in the 11th house with Sun.
Yes, this is the period, folks, that he won the Emmy. He was in Ketu Jupiter, which, you know, identifying this from the standpoint of the Rashi, I mean, it could have happened in a lot of subperiods here, Venus, but again, there it's involved in. So anyway, but it happened in Jupiter Ketu, and I think to see one of the reasons why that period and subperiod activated the Raja Yoga in particular, and you know, brought this, you know, its highest achievement during this time. It was in the Ketu Jupiter, and you see those in the Shamsha with Ketu giving the results of Jupiter, and Jupiter in its exaltation sign in the 11th house of awards with the Sun. Right? So it's a rather clear picture from that standpoint. One thing in showing the Rashi again, I want to highlight about that yoga that we mentioned. If in addition there's an exalted planet in the first house or aspecting the first house, and if that exalted planet is a natural benefic, then this yoga manifests very strongly. Very strongly. Let me just show you another quick example of that I often use to illustrate this particular yoga.
David Copperfield?
Good memory, Rohit. Good memory. Exactly. See the similarities, folks. Now, we don't have all the benefics falling in the angles here. So the yoga that is applying here is a separate and different yoga. Here the yoga is just the idea that these, the natural, the 3rd, 6th, and 11th house is going to be predominantly having malefics. And you see here we have a similar exchange, 311 for the same Lagna Virgo. Now it's Rahu there in the 3rd house instead of Ketu. But you've got the exalted Lagna Lord in the Lagna, and this also is it's not the same as the unusual Raja Yoga that we're talking about. First of all, it requires that all the natural benefics be in Kendras, but it's simply the idea of natural benefic, either aspecting or in the Lagna, will also give the results of this yoga strongly, which it did. You know, at a very, very young age, very young age actually, he started to become quite renowned, quite famous, appearing on his own TV shows in his Rahu major period. Again, giving the results of this Raja Yoga. Okay, so this is what I had to share with you, folks. We just have a little time remaining here. If there are other questions, I would take them at this time about anything we've discussed, anything related to the last article, the Guru's Clue. I'm ready to do that now. Not that I have all the answers, which of course I don't, but I usually have an opinion. I usually have an opinion based on my experience. Really enjoyed the participation from everyone today, and hope that kind of thing continues. Maybe next time we'll give other people a chance here. But any additional thoughts before we conclude?
Mark, there is just again a question by Jay about this, because we mentioned Mukta Yoga in the previous chart of the actor, and
we mentioned Mukta Yoga.
Yes, I think Girish said that Jupiter is in Mukta Yoga. Yes.
Right.
Oh, you mean in the chart of James Garner?
Yeah.
Ah, and, yes, you know. Well, it is, you know, but you know, it's actually the more powerful combination there is Chandra Adi Yoga. Right? I mean, you're right. It's a part of Makuta Yoga, but it's, you know, also with all the benefics falling in the 6th house from the moon, not just Jupiter. Jupiter's strong in its own sign, of course. It's also Makuta Yoga. So there's a question about that, or what form? What?
Actually, Jay wants to be clarified because doesn't moon also have to be in its own house or exaltation?
For Makuta Yoga?
Yeah. That's
no, you may be confusing that with Gauri Yoga. Right? Gauri Yoga, in which now the moon has to be well placed. It's either got to be in its own or exaltation sign, and we see the aspect of a Jupiter. Hopefully that Jupiter is strong to produce the better quality Gauri Yoga, and hopefully those planets fall in good houses, angle and trine houses, like we see in the chart of our current president, Barack Obama, who became president partly courtesy of his Gauri Yoga. Right? But that's a good clarification. Good clarification. You know, now it does help with Makuta Yoga. Helps a lot if, or with Chandra Adi Yoga, if the moon is very bright and waxing, right? In which the moon can give, you know, stronger and more favorable and more powerful results. You know, in my Graha Yoga subscription program, I'm going to be, you know, when we look at the lunar yogas, I'm going to be looking extensively at Chandra Adi Yoga, and which ones are better Chandra yogas and which ones are not, and why. Right? So stay tuned for those of you who are involved in that program, that you'll see that. Okay, so unless there's anything else, I think we've come to our time today. I want to give my great thanks and gratitude to Ekaterina for stepping in for Arun, in this case, to be our wonderful moderator. And we've made a recording, and of course, you know, you'll all get this distributed to you. We didn't hand out many virtual chocolates today. I wasn't doing much of that, but we got a few. And some very excellent, intelligent comments. What's gratifying for me is I see the learning building, right? I see the learning points that have happened, you know, over the different articles, and I see people retaining those and then being able to recognize those in the charts we're looking at, which of course, you know, it means people are learning, which is, you know, the whole point of this program, and that's very gratifying to me. So we will end, as usual, with our Sanskrit prayer. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityom Ma Mutam Gamaya Sarvesham Shanti Bhavatu Sarvesham Swati Bhavatu Sarvesham Purnam Bhavatu Sarvesham Mangalam Bhavatu Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.